Welcome to another tale of horror by H.P. Lovecraft. Today is the thrilling conclusion of a famous tale by the name of The Call of Cthulhu. We are going to be finishing off Act 3, The Madness from the Sea. So grab your blankies, grab your snackies, try not to shit your pants from the fear of Cthulhu. So here we go. Buckle up and try not to go mad. Act 3, The Madness from the Sea. If heaven ever wishes to grant me a boon, it will be a total effacy of the results of a mere chance which fixed my eye on a certain stray piece of shelf paper. It was nothing on which I would naturally have stumbled in my course of my daily round, for it was an old number of an Australian journal, the Sydney Bulletin, for April 18, 1925. It had escaped even the cutting bureau, which had at that time of its assurance been avidly collecting material for my uncle's research. I had largely given over my inquiries into what Professor Angio called the Cthulhu cult, and was visiting a learned friend in Paterson, New Jersey, the curator of a local museum and a mineralogist of note. Examining one day the reserved specimens roughly set on the storage shelves in a rear room of the museum, my eye was caught by an odd picture in one of the old papers spread beneath the stones. It was the Sydney Bulletin I have mentioned, for my friend has wide affiliations in all conceivable foreign parts, and the picture was a half tone cut of a hideous stone image almost identical with that which Legras had found in the swamp. Eagerly clearing the sheets of its precious contents, I scanned the item in detail and was disappointed to find it of only moderate length. What it suggested, however, was of pertinence, significance to my flagging quest, and I carefully tore it out for immediate action. It read as follows: Mystery derelict found at sea. Vigilant arrives with helpless armed New Zealand yacht in tow. One survivor and dead man found aboard. Tale of desperate battle and deaths at sea. Rescued seaman refuses. Particulars of strange experience. Odd idol found in his possession. Inquiry to follow. The Morrison Co's freighter Vigilant, bound from Valparaiso, arrived this morning at its wharf in Darling Harbor, having in tow the battling and disabled but heavily armed steam yacht Alert of Dunedin, New Zealand, which was sighted April 12th in south latitude 34 degrees 21, west longitude 152 degrees 17. With one living and one dead man aboard, the Vigilant left Valparaiso March 25th, and on April 2nd was driven considerably south of her course by exceptionally heavy storms and monster waves. On April 12th, the derelict was sighted, and though apparently deserted, was found upon boarding to contain one survivor in a half delirious condition and one man who had evidently been dead for more than a week. The living man was clutching a horrible stone idol of unknown origin, about a foot in height, regarding whose nature authorities at Sydney University, the Royal Society, and the museum in College Street all profess complete bafflement, and which the survivor says he found in the cabin of the yacht, in a small carved shrine of common pattern. This man after recovering his senses, told an exceedingly strange story of piracy and slaughter. And he is Gustav Jonasson, a Norwegian of some intelligence, and had been second mate of the two masted schooners Emma of Auckland, which sailed for Callao February 20th with a complement of 11 men. The Emma, he says, was delayed and thrown wildly south of her course by a great storm of March 1st, and on March 22nd, in south latitude 59 degrees 51, west longitude 128 degrees 34, encountered the Alert, manned by a queer and evil looking crew of Kanakas and half castes, being ordered preempt- peremptorily to turn back. Captain Collins refused, whereupon the strange crew began to fire savagely and without warning upon the schooner with a peculiarly heavy battery of brass cannon forming part of the yacht's equipment. The Emma's men shrewd fight, says the survivor, and though the schooner began to sink from shots beneath the waterline, they managed to heave along their enemy and board her, grappling with the savage crew on the yacht's deck and being forced to kill them all. The number being slightly superior because of their particularly aberrant and desperate, though rather clumsy, mode of fighting. Three of the Emma's men, including Captain Collins and First Mate Green, were killed, and the remaining eight under Second Mate Johannesson proceeded to navigate the captured yacht, going ahead in their original direction to see if any reason for their ordering back had existed. The next day, it appears, they raised and landed on a small island, although none is known to exist in that part of the ocean. And six of the men somehow died ashore, though Johannesson is queerly reticent about this part of his story and speaks only of their falling into a rock chasm. Later, it seems he and one companion boarded the yacht and tried to manage her, but were beaten about by the storm on April 2nd. From that time till his rescue on the 12th, the man remembers little, and he does not even recall when William Britton, his companion, died. Britton, Britton's death reveals no apparent cause and was probably due to excitement or exposure. Cable advices from Dunedin report that the Alert was well known there as an island trader and bore an evil reputation along the waterfront. It was owned by a curious group of half castes whose frequent meetings and night trips to the woods attracted no little curiosity, and it had set sail in great haste just after the storm and earth tremors of March 1st. Our Auckland correspondent gives the Emma and her crew an excellent reputation, and Johannesson as described as a sober and worthy man. The Admiralty will institute an inquiry on the whole matter beginning tomorrow, at which every effort will be made to induce Johannesson to speak more freely than he had done hitherto. This was all together with the picture of the hellish image, but what a train of ideas it started in my mind. Here were new treasures of data on the Cthulhu cult, and evidence that it had strange interests at sea as well as on land. What motive prompted the hybrid crew to order back the Emma as they sailed about with their hideous idol? What was the unknown island on which six of the Emma's crew had died, and about which the mate Johannesson was so secretive? What had the vice admiral's investigation brought out? And what was known of the noxious cult in Dunedin, and most marvelous of all, what deep and more than natural linkage of dates was this which gave a malign and now undeniable significance to the various turn of events so carefully noted by my uncle? March 1st, or February 28th, according to the international dateline. The earthquake and storms had come. From Dunedin, the Alert and her noisome crew had darted eagerly forth, as if imperiously summoned, and on the other side of the earth's poets and artists had begun to dream of strange, dank, cyclopean cities, whilst a young sculptor had molded in his sleep the form of the dreaded Cthulhu. March 23rd, the crew of the Emma landed on an unknown island and left 6 men dead. And on that date, the dreams of sensitive men assumed a heightened vividness and darkened with dread of a giant monster's malign pursuit. Whilst an architect had gone mad and a sculptor had lapsed suddenly into delirium. And what of this storm of April 2nd, the date on which all dreams of the dank city ceased, and Wilcox emerged unharmed from the bondage of strange fever? What of all this, and of those hints of old Castro about the sunken starboard old ones and their coming rain, their faithful cult and their mastery of dreams? Was I tottering on the brink of cosmic horrors which man's power to bear? If so, they must be horrors of mind alone, for in some way the 2nd of April had put a stop to whatever monstrous menace had begun its siege of mankind's soul. That evening, after a day of hurried cabling and arranging, I bade my host adieu and took a train for San Francisco. In less than a month, I was in Dunedin, where, however, I found that little was known of the strange cult members who had lingered in the old sea taverns. Waterfront scum was far too common for special mention, though there was a vague talk about one inland trip these mongrels had made, during which faint drumming and red flame were noted on the distant hills. In Auckland, I learned that Johannesson had returned with yellow hair turned white after perfunctory and inconclusive questioning at Sydney, and had thereafter sold his cottage in the West Street and sailed with his wife to his old home in Oslo. Of his stirring experience he would tell his friends no more than he had told the Admiralty officials, and all they could do was to give me his Oslo address. After that, I went to Sydney and talked profitlessly with seamen and members of the Vice Admiralty Court. I saw the Alert, now sold and in commercial use, at Circular Quay in Sydney Cove, but gained nothing from its non-committal bulk. The crouching image, with its cuttlefish head, dragon body, scaly wings, and hieroglyphic pedestal, was preserved in the museum at Hyde Park, and I studied it long and well, finding it a thing of balefully exquisite workmanship, and with the same utter mystery, terrible antiquity, and unearthly strangeness of material which I had noted in Legras's smaller specimen. Geologists, the curator told me, had found it a monstrous puzzle, for they vowed that the world held no rock like it. Then I thought with a shudder of what old Castro had told Legras about the primal great ones. They had come from the stars and had brought their images with them. Shaken with such a mental revolution as I had never before known, I now resolved to visit Mate Johannesson in Oslo. Sailing for London, I re-embarked at once for the Norwegian capital, and one autumn day landed at the trim wharves in the shadow of Egbert. Johanneson's address, I discovered, lay in the old town of King Harold Harada, which kept alive the name of Oslo during all the centuries that the greater city masqueraded as Christiana. I made the brief trip by taxicab and knocked with palpable heart at the door of a neat and ancient building with plastered front. A sad faced woman in black answered my summons, and I was stung with disappointment when she told me in halting English that Gustav Johannesson was no more. He had not survived his return, said his wife, for the doing at sea in 1925 had broken him. He had told her no more than he had told the public, but had left a long manuscript, a technical matters, as he said, written in English, evidently in order to safeguard her from the peril of casual perusal during a walk through a narrow lane near Gothenburg dock. A bundle of papers falling from an antique window had knocked him down. Two Lascar sailors at once helped him to his feet, but before the ambulance could reach him, he was dead. Physicians found no adequate cause for the end and laid it to heart trouble and weakened constitution. I now felt gnawing at my vitals that dark terror which we never leave will never leave me till I too am at rest, accidentally or otherwise. Persuading the window Persuading the widow that my connection with her husband's technical matters was sufficient to entitle me to his manuscript, I bore the document away and began to read it on the London boat. It was a simple, rambling thing, a naive sailor's effect at a post facto diary, and strove to recall day by day that last awful voyage. I cannot attempt to transcribe in verbatim in all its cloudiness and redundance, but I will tell it's just enough to shew you why the sound of the water against the vessel's side became so unendurable to me that I stopped my ears with cotton. Johannesson, thank God, did not know quite all, even though he saw the city and the thing. But I shall never sleep calmly again when I think of the horrors that lurk carelessly behind life, in time and in space, and of those unhallowed blasphemies from elder stars which dream beneath the sea, known and favored by a nightmare cult ready and eager to loose them on the world whenever another earthquake shall heave their monstrous stone again city again to the sun and air. Johannesson's voyage had begun just as he told it to Vice Admiralty. The Emma in Baust had cleared Auckland on February 20th, and had felt the full force of the earthquake's born tempest, which must have heaved up from the sea bottom the horrors that filled men's dreams. Once more under control, the ship was making good progress when held up by the Alert on March 22nd, and I could feel the mate's reject as he wrote on his bombardment and sinking of the swarthy cult fiend on the Alert. He speaks with significant horror that was some peculiarly abnormal quality about them which made them destruction seem almost a duty. And Johannesson, true and ingenious, wonder at the charge of ruthless brought against his parry during the proceedings of the court and inquiry. Then, driven ahead by curiosity in the captured yacht under Johannessen's command, the men sight a great stone pillar striking out from the sea, and in south latitude 47 degrees 7, west longitude 126 degrees 43, came upon a coastline of mingled mud, ooze, and weedy cyclopean masonry, which can be nothing less than the tangible substance of Earth's supreme terror, the nightmare corpse city of Riley, that was built in measureless aeons behind history by the vast, loathsome shapes that steeped up, down from the dark stars. There lay great Cthulhu and his hordes, hidden in green slimy vaults and the dreams of the sensitive, and called imperiously to the faithful to come on a pillage of liberation and restoration. All this Johnson did not suspect, but God knows he soon saw enough. I suppose the only that only a single mountaintop, the hideous monolith crowned citadel whereupon great Cthulhu was buried, which emerged from the waters when I think about the extent of all that may be brooding down there, and almost wish to kill myself forthwith. Johannesson and his men were awed by the cosmic majesty of this dripping Babylon of elder daemons, and must have guessed without guidance that it was nothing of this or of any sane planet. All at the unbelievable size of the greenish stone blocks, at the dizzying heights of the great cavern monolith, and at the stupefying identity of the colossal statues and bas reliefs with the queer image found in the shrine on the outer, is poignantly visible in every line of the mat's frightened description. Without knowing what futurism is like, Johannesson achieved something very close to it. When he spoke of the city, for instance, of describing any definite structure or building, he dwells only on broad impressions of vast angles and stone surfaces, surfaces too great to belong to anything right or proper for this earth. The impious and horrible images of and hieroglyphs. I mention his talk about angles because he struggles something. Wilcox had told me of his awful dreams. He had said that the geometry of the dream place was he was uh, uh of the dream place he saw was abnormal, non-Euclidean, and loathsomely redolent of spheres and dimensions apart from ours. Now, an unlettered seaman felt the same thing whilst gazing at the terrible reality. Johannesson and his men landed at a sloping mud bank on this monstrous acropolis and clambered slipperily up over tiny oozy blocks which could have been no mortal staircase. The very sun of heaven seemed distorted when viewed through the polarizing miasma welling out from the sea soaked perversion, and twisted menace and suspense lurked leeringly in those crazily elusive angles of craven rock where a second glance shrewd concavity after the first shrewd convexity. Something very like fright had come over all of the explorers before anything more definite than rock and ooze and weed was seen. Each would have fled had he not feared the scorn of the other, and it was only half heartedly that they searched vainly, as it proved, for some portable souvenir or to bear away. It was Rodriguez, the Portuguese, who climbed up the foot of the monolith and shouted of what he had found. The rest followed him and looked curiously at the immense carved door with the now familiar squid dragon bas relief. It was, Johannesson said, like a great barn door, and they all felt that it was a door because of the ornate lintel, threshold, and jambs around it. There they could not decide whether it lay flat like a trap door or slantwise like an outside cellar door. As Wilcox would have said, the geometry of the place was all wrong. One could not be sure that the sea and the ground were horizontal. Hence, the relative position of everything else seemed phantasmally variable. Britton pushed at the stone in several places without result. Then Donovan felt over it delicately over around the edge, pressing each point separately as he went. He climbed interminably along the grotesque stone molding that is, one would call it climbing if the thing was not after all horizontal. And the men wondered how any door in the universe could be so vast. Then, very softly and slowly, the acre great panel began to give inward the top, and they saw that it was balanced. Donovan slid or somehow propelled himself down or along the jamb and rejoined his fellows, and everyone watched the queer recession of the monstrously cavern portal. In this fantasy of prismatic distortion, it moved animously in a diagonal way so that all the rules of matter and perspective seemed upset. The aperture was black with a darkness almost material, that tenebrousness, and indeed a positive quality, for it obscured such parts of the inner walls as ought to have been revealed, and actually burst forth like smoke from its aeon long imprisonment, visibly darkening the sun as it slank away into the shrunken gibbous sky, then flapping membranous wings, the odor rising from the newly opened depths was intolerable. And at length the quick eared Hawkins thought he heard a nasty sloping sound down there. Everyone listened, and everyone was listening still when it lumbered slobberingly into sight and gropingly squeezed its gelatinous green immensity through the black doorway into the tainted outside air of the poisoned city of madness. Poor Johannesson's handwriting almost gave out when he heard of this. Of the 6 men who never reached the ship, he thinks 2 perished of pure fright in that accustomed instant. The thing cannot be described. There is no language for such abysmal shrieking and immemorial lunacy, such eldritch contradictions of all matter, force, and cosmic order. A mountain walked or stumbled. God, what wonder that what wonder that across the earth a great architect went mad, and poor Wilcox raved with fewer in that telepathic instance. The thing of the idols, the green sticky spawn of the stars, had opened to claim his own. The stars were right again, and what was an age old cult had failed to do by design. A band of innocent sailors had done by accident. After vigilantillion of years, great Cthulhu was loose again. and ravening for delight. Three men were swept up by the flabby claws before somebody turned. God rest them. If there be any rest in the universe, then were Donovan, Guerrera, and Engstrom. Parker slipped by the other three were plunging frenzied over endless vistas of green crusted rock to the boat, and Johannesson swears he was allowed up by an angel angle of masonry which shouldn't have been there. An angle which was acute, but behaved as if it were obtuse. So only Britton and Johannesson reached the boat and pulled desperately for the alert as the mountainous monstrosity flopped down the slimy stones and hesitated floating at the edge of the water. Steam had not been suffered to go down entirely. Despite the departure of all hands for the shore, it was the work of only a few moments of feverishly pushing up and down between the wheel and engines to get the Albert underway. Slowly, amidst the distorted horrors of that indescribable scene, she began to churn the lethal waters whilst on the masonry of the charnel store that was not of the earth, the Titan. Think thing from the stars slavered and gibbered like Polypheme, cursing the fleeing ships of Odysseus. Then, bolder than the story's Cyclops, great Cthulhu slid greasily into the vault and began to pursue with vast wave rising strokes of cosmic potency. By Britain would look back and went mad, laughing shrilly as he kept on laughing at intervals till death found him. One night in the cabin, whilst Jonathan was wandering deliriously. But Johannesson had not given out yet, knowing that the thing could barely, oh, knowing that the thing could surely overtake the alert until steam was fully up. He resolved on a desperate chance, and setting the engine for full speed, ran lightning like on deck and reversed the wheel. There was a mighty eddying and foaming of the noisome brine, and as the steam mounted here and the brave Norwegian drove his vessel head on against the pursuing jelly which rode above the unclean froth like the stern of a demonic galleon. The awful squid head was withering feelers came nearly up to the bowsprit of the sturdy yacht with but Johannesson drove on relentlessly. There was a burning as of an exploding bladder, a slushy nastiness of the cloven sunfish, a stretch stench as of a thousand opening graves, and a sound that the chronicler would not put on paper. But for an instant the ship was befooled by an acrid and blinding green cloud, and then there was only a venomous seething alert astern where God in heaven, the scattered plasticity of the nameless sky spawn was nebulously recombining in its hateful original form, whilst its distance widened every second as the alert gained impetus from its morning stream. That was all. After Johannesson only brooded over the idol in the cabin and attended to a few matters of food for himself and the lightning maniacs by his side. He did not try to navigate after the first blood night, for the reaction had taken something out of his soul. Then came the storm of April 2nd, and a gathering of the clouds about his consciousness. There was a sense of spiral or spectral whirling through liquid gulfs of infinity and rides through a reeling universe on a comet's tail, and of hysterical plunges from the pit to the moon, and from the moon back again to the pit, all living by a cachinating chorus of the distorted, humorous elder god and the green, bat-winged, mocking imps of Tartarus. Of that dream came rescue, the vigilant, the vice admiralty court, the streets of Dunedin, and the long voyage back home to the old house by Egberg. He could not tell. They were, but his wife must have not guessed death. Voyage back in the old house by Edgeworth. He could not tell if they're mad, if he would write of what he knew before death came, and of his wife must not guess. Death would be a boon if only it would blot out the memories. That was the document I read. Now I have placed in it the tin box, beside the bas relief and the papers of the Professor Angiel. With it shall go the record of mine, the test of my own sanity, wherein is pieced together that which I hope may never be pieced together again. I have looked upon all that the universe has to hold of horror, and even the skies of spring and the flowers of summer must ever afterwards be poison to me. But I do not think my life will be gone. As my uncle went, as poor Johannesson went, so I shall too. Know too much, and the cult still lives. I know too much. How the cult still lives. Cthulhu still lives too, I suppose. Again, in that chasm of stone which he shielded himself again since the sun was young. He accursed city, his accursed city, is sunken once more. For the vigilant sailed over the spot after the April storm, but his ministries on earth still below and prance and slay around the idol capped monoliths in lonely places, but must have been trapped by the sinking whilst within his black abyss, or else the world would by now be screaming with fright and frenzy. Who knows the end? What was risen may sink, and what has sunk may rise. Loathsomeness, vista, and his risen may sink, and what I had sunk may rise. Loathsomeness waits and dreams in the deep, and decay spreads over the tottering flames of men. A time will come, but I must not and cannot think. Let me pray that I do not survive this manuscript. My exposures may be cautious for. And that concludes the reading of Call of Cthulhu. Wow. Halfway through that, I was getting so tired. Uh, I am going to be calling it a night. I'm probably going to play a little bit off stream, but here you are, The Call of Cthulhu. If you like that short story, all 3 acts, make sure you like and subscribe the channel down below on YouTube. For next time's tale, we're going to have Pickman's Model. But look forward to that, and I will see you on the next one. As always, please, good night. Don't let the bed bugs bite. And as always, don't stay a stranger. Boop. Bye. Go check out the playlist. They should pop up somewhere right over around over here somewhere. All right, go check those out. Bye, 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 bye.